Dan Lennington from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, who works on their First Amendment cases a lot, who's constantly doing constitutional civil rights stuff for Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. By the way, you should all make donations to Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, because without them, where would we be? I don't even want to think about it. But Dan, it's in your capacity as a lawyer who has been on multiple fronts. You've been a federal prosecutor. You've been a state prosecutor. Now you're a constitutional attorney. I want to talk about Arctic frost and the 38 people from Wisconsin who are on that list. I am among them. This is not just about me, but we have no idea what the predicate for our surveillance, and in some cases secret subpoenas, we have no idea what the predicate for the government's investigation of us was. And we still don't. And I'm wondering what to do about that.
Well, thanks for having me on. I would start by saying we have an idea about what was going on, because this Arctic frost was opened in 2022 by Biden's DOJ, and it's led by prosecutor Jack Smith. And this was the case, eventually, that criminal charges were filed by the federal government against President Trump. And the case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that's the case where the U.S. Supreme Court said President Trump was immune as president for actions he took as president. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. That Arctic frost investigation was an investigation by the FBI into all the people around the country who believed that it was the legal right of the President of the United States to have alternate electors in the event that the results in 7 states were overturned: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, New Mexico, and Arizona. There was a group of people, including a group in Wisconsin, that used established legal precedent to meet and vote on an alternative slate of electors to preserve President Trump's right to the electoral votes in those 7 states. This was no secret. Everybody knew this was going on. This has been going on for over 150 years in America, actually, this alternative theory. And President Biden's DOJ investigated everybody who was involved in that process. There were 430 people investigated that we know of right now, including 10 members of Congress, including Ron Johnson. There are groups like Turning Point USA, Republican Attorney General's Association. Chuck Grassley said that the entire Republican apparatus was under investigation for supporting this legal theory that perhaps if the election went out differently, that maybe those electoral votes should have shifted towards President Trump.
Everyone did nothing illegal. None of this is illegal that you're describing. It's not illegal.
Nothing is illegal. It is a legal strategy to protect your rights in the case of a disputed election. In 2020, in December, was a disputed election. But this went far beyond, obviously, President Trump. The documents that I've seen said there were 400 subpoenas, including for financial records. There were 10 search warrants. 5 of those were search warrants of lawyers' documents. There was a congressman who had a search warrant executed against him, 2 White House officials. There were search warrants for electronic devices, iCloud devices, email accounts, donor files, financial data, bank records, all with the intent of finding out that this was some sort of a crime to preserve a legal theory. Now, these people in Wisconsin, which you're on the list, and I took a very close look at this list today. There's 38 people possibly mentioned, although 19 are only named. And the 19 who are named, 10 of them were alternate electors. These were people who said the votes for Wisconsin should go to President Trump in the event that the election was found out to be wrongly decided. These are the people who were preserving Trump's legal position. There was 10 of those. There were 4 people who coordinated sending those documents to Congress, like putting them in the mail, making photocopies, that sort of thing. There are 3 lawyers. Jim Trupis is one of those lawyers. There's 1 congressman on the list from Wisconsin, which I don't actually hear people talking about, Scott Fitzgerald. name is on this list, Congressman Fitzgerald. And then there is one radio talk show host. Now, the congressman and the radio talk show host seem like they don't fit in this process at all. I understand the idea that the people who signed the alternate slate of electors, the people who were the lawyers for them and coordinated, that maybe you would write their names down as like people I should talk to and ask questions about. But I cannot for the life of me understand why you, as a radio talk show host, actually in exercising your First Amendment rights to be a journalist and ask questions and to make news, that you should be on there somehow because Jim Trupis happened to be on your radio talk show a few times. That's apparently the only reason why you're on the list.
So that's my question, because I don't get the predicate. And yes, the predicate is we're going to investigate anybody who claimed that we should have contested the election in 2020, but that's not a crime. So that's a bad predicate. I want to see that in writing. I want to see that Merrick Garland and Christopher Wray or whoever and Jack Smith signed off on, hey, they disputed the outcome of the 2020 election. And by the way, we're going to investigate this in 2022. And I want to see the piece of documentation that says she's friends with Jim Trupis and had him on her show. I mean, because that's nuts. It's crazy. It's tyrannical. It's not American. I mean, pick your pejorative. It's just not. It's not justice. It's tyranny.
Now we don't even know why these 38 names from Wisconsin are listed.
Right.
They're
we want to know
in a set of documents that Kash Patel, the FBI director, turned over and said, hey, we're looking through this Arctic frost stuff. We found this list of names. Now, when I used to run a grand jury investigation and prosecute people for federal crimes, including for forgery, which is the alleged crime here, forgery. So you're a party to forgery. I would have a target. I would say, I think that this person stole this person's identity. This person was passing bad checks. This person committed bank fraud. And maybe as an investigator, I might have a separate list. I work with the FBI and say, hey, who should we talk to about this? Maybe we should talk to somebody at the bank who saw them pass the bad check. We should talk to a person at Home Depot who maybe witnessed the transaction. And you'd have these people who are not alleged to have done anything wrong, but maybe they're people you should talk to. But there is a specific federal law that applies to the FBI that says when you are dealing with members of the press, which would include a radio talk show host like yourself, you have to be extremely careful because those people, like you, have the freedom of press, which is a First Amendment guaranteed right. And the FBI and the DOJ are incredibly sensitive to any case involving a potential journalist. And the idea that they just sort of willy-nilly wrote your name down in this FBI investigative file shows that these people running this were reckless, that they were actually not trying to investigate an actual crime. They were doing something else. They were trying to get Trump, obviously.
It was a fishing expedition to see what you could find. So here's my speculation on this. My speculation is, because I know that during the course of the many years that Jim Trupis has endured, I think now 17 different processes, that the FBI wanted my text messages and my emails to Jim Trupis. So I have them on the list because Jim Trupis is a friend of mine. Jim Trupis comes on my show. Jim Trupis was, in fact, a source that I would use from time to time, and not just on elections, on redistricting, because he drew district maps. He's famous for being an expert at that. So I've known him for years. I'm on that list because he's my friend, and I know him, and we communicate, and that's not enough. That's not enough to put me on a list. It's not enough, frankly, to put Jim on a list, that we know each other and he works in politics as a lawyer. This investigation, if you look at it and pull the stick back, this was to destroy the conservative network nationally. And Wisconsin was just simply part of that process, I think. This is John Doe writ large.
The other concern you have is that they may have taken all of your emails, texts, and you wouldn't even know it. And the reason we know this is because Senator Ted Cruz received a letter from AT&T. This has been publicly, this is on the website of the Senate. And he said, AT&T said, we're not turning over the information about Ted Cruz because he has a constitutional protection called the Speech and Debate Clause, which says that senators and congressmen have this wide latitude in who they talk to about what. And so we're not turning over his stuff. He said that Judge Boasberg in the D.C. District Court, who was the one overseeing all this, he said they were just probably printing them off from a printer, these letters to the AT&T, Verizon, all these carriers saying, don't you dare tell these subjects whose emails and texts and voicemails that we're stealing, don't tell them about this investigation. So you may never know that you had your texts and emails taken.
I have an MNVO that uses Verizon towers, so I don't have AT&T. I didn't get that letter. I wouldn't.
Yeah. So who knows? And that's the problem. And so hopefully Senator Grassley, Senator Johnson are going to keep digging on this. We'll get some more information. And, the result of this, where's the justice? The justice is, on the one hand, the Trump DOJ and the Trump FBI is going to be able to discipline people who broke the law and give them the process they deserve and take away their jobs and to punish them in the way that's appropriate by law. But also people who have had their constitutional rights taken away from them by the federal government will have opportunity to file civil rights lawsuits, and it will depend on how egregious the facts are. And these facts seem pretty egregious to me.
Yeah, the civil rights lawsuits are a challenge because people have to hire lawyers, and we're talking about a lot of people here. Getting over that hump is difficult. Eric O'Keefe can tell you all about how difficult it is to get over that hump because he tried to bring one after the John Doe investigation in Wisconsin. But here's what I want. I want everything unredacted and all of the information be made public. I want to see on the email or the document that's stamped, we put Vicki McKenna's name on that list because she's friends with Jim Trupis, and they probably talked about stuff that we can use maybe to get them both. And I want to know exactly everything that they did get. I want to know if it's my text messages to my husband. Is it information about my bank? I don't have any idea. That's what I want. And I want people fired. I'd love to have people thrown in prison, but I think these would rise to ethical violations, maybe not crimes, right, Dan?
Probably not crimes, and I'll just tell you, we put a lot of faith in our prosecutors here. When I was a federal prosecutor, if I wanted to have a grand jury search warrant or grand jury subpoena issued for someone's records, it was just in my judgment whether I thought that information might be relevant and help me in my investigation. And so there was a lot placed on me to act ethically. And so if you're presupposing that these prosecutors were not acting ethically and they were acting politically motivated and they're walking around with this authority to issue a grand jury subpoena for someone's documents based on whether they think it will be sort of helpful to their investigation, there's really no guardrails. There's really no guardrails for them. And so, we're going to have to find out. Full transparency is great. Remember during the Obama administration, we found out about Lois Lerner and the IRS and all the retaliation going on by the IRS. We learned about that years later. The John Doe, we found out, I did a postmortem of what happened with that. We found out that they leaked all the emails from the people and Scott Walker and everybody just sort of in retaliation for them having their John Doe shut down, which was a second sort of a stab in the back by that investigation. So it's probably going to take years before we find out what actually happened here. But hopefully we'll get some action from the Senate on this.
Yeah, I'd like something. About a year and a half ago, I got a call from a CNN reporter asking me about an email that somebody had sent to me. I was like, wow, how'd you get my emails? This might be an explanation or an answer to the question on how in the heck do you get my emails?